Welcome to the Run for God Run Club, where you will find God in a runner's space.
Welcome to the Run for God Run Club. This is your one stop each week to be motivated and inspired to get off the couch and onto the running trail where you can, in turn, inspire others to do the same. Let's learn, laugh, and leap into running together, giving God the glory for what we are able to do in His name. Amen. I am your running host, Dean Thompson. You know, we talk a lot about overcoming obstacles on this podcast, and we're going to share a poignant story about that today. Also, I talk about how God gives us opportunities to give Him a shout out. And here to help me sort through it all is Run for God founder Mitchell Hollis.
Thanks for having me, Dean. So talking about barriers, you just completed a little race this weekend where you overcame some barriers, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that in the story.
Oh, so we'll get to that on down.
So we will, but it's it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah.
And I tell you, there were so many stories that came out of this weekend. It was a productive weekend for me from a story writing standpoint, because it was just some cool stuff.
More than just a race, huh?
It really was. Or a couple of races. Yeah.
All right, before we get started, let's talk about this week's sponsor. Again, if you have a business out there and you want to support what Run for God's doing and allow us to support you in the process, you can send an email to runlanehollis@gmail.com. He'll get you all the information on how that all works. But this week's sponsor is one of our good friends, Barry Cates, down at One Source Business Products. One Source is Dalton's only locally owned office supply company. If you're looking for office supply, furniture, printing, janitorial, custom forms, or stamps, they have you covered, and their prices are right. I know that because we use them. So that's why they compare and we save. Give them a call at 706-516-3900, or you can find them on the web at onesourcebp.com. Kate's family is just a great family. I was with my son Lane and Barry's son Matt last night. Matt plays the drums in the praise band at church, and just a great. It's fun to do business with great Christian people that think like us and have the same goals as us. So go check them out if you need business supplies.
Absolutely. I've noticed that's a theme in our sponsors.
It is.
It's a bunch of good Christian folks that want to support us. Yeah. Facebook post, Stephanie Pinchak Marino, hashtag never miss a Monday. Yesterday, our pastor preached on the importance of the community in the church. With so many people staying home and watching church online, we're missing something. He told the story of Luke 5:18 through 25 about Jesus healing the paralyzed man. This man was brought to Jesus by his friends and lowered through the roof to get to Jesus. We don't know if he asked his friends to do this or if they recognized his need and took him to Jesus. We do know that the paralyzed man would not have met Jesus if it were not for his friends. You need people in your life to help you get to Jesus. We need each other. We are better together. Even in running, no one can take the steps for you, but we need each other to get through all the training to the finish line. I need people encouraging me to keep going. I need people to keep me accountable when I say I'm going to eat those extra veggies and cut back on the sweets. I need someone to say, that's not such a good idea. Today's fuel, pre-run, Ezekiel bread and water. Mile 3, 1 block, 18 ounces of water throughout. Post-run, other half of my Ezekiel toast, watered down Gatorade. The real challenge for me comes with fuel the rest of the day. You don't get a pass because you ran this morning. A lot of people look at that the other way around, don't they?
They do.
I ran this morning so I can have that bowl of ice cream.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of that sometimes, unfortunately. Dean, I want to talk about something that Stephanie kind of hits on here. And it may step on some people's toes. It definitely, I stepped on my own toes here. Mm-hmm. But she's talking about the concept that we need each other, and specifically the church. We need each other. I'm going to be honest. I don't like what I'm seeing today with Christians, and I put myself in the category of about what I'm about to say, because I've done it too. We need to stop being down on the church. I know there's a lot of choices that happen in the church nowadays.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. I believe that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yes, back 100 years ago, you went to church, you heard a sermon, you went to dinner after, and that was pretty much it. But nowadays, we have a lot more things that really draws people into the church. And I was running with a gentleman, I don't know, a couple years ago, and our church was setting up for the Easter egg hunt. And the gentleman I was running with really started talking bad about the Easter egg hunt. He said, I don't know why our churches these days feel that they need to do all this stuff, that the Word of God is enough. And he's right. The Word of God is enough.
Right.
But Jesus also said, go and make disciples of all nations. Go out and share the word with people wherever they're at. If that means putting on an Easter egg hunt to bring people into the doors of the church, then by all means do an Easter egg hunt. That's not my ministry.
Yeah.
But where sometimes we as Christians and the church fail is I state my opinions on another ministry because that's not my ministry. And because it's not my ministry, then we shouldn't do that. And that's just wrong. It really is wrong. Another thing is, you know, we put on a lot of people host the Run for God classes at their church, the 5K Challenge.
Right.
5K Challenge has been taught in over 6,500 communities around the world at this point. And what do we say on here so often? As the instructor,
Yeah.
it changes you more than it changes the people in your class. It has a reciprocal effect, and many people don't realize that when they go into it. But I say it all the time. Every time I've taught a 5K challenge, when we graduate that class, I'm the one that's changed.
Yeah.
And it's because of the people that I'm teaching. And we have to look at church that way.
Yeah.
You know, I don't like what I'm seeing. There's a lot of, and I call it church hopping. You know, people going from church to church and they're making comments like, well, I'm not being fed. And that's true in some of the cases.
Sure.
But much of the time it's a heart issue.
Yeah.
We need to go to church. Yes, we need to be fed, but we need to be pouring into other people.
Yeah.
And that's why the church is so important. If you believe the statistic that Billy Graham used to say that 50% of the people sitting in the pews on Sunday morning will not make it to heaven. They're not saved.
Yeah.
And so I hear things like, well, the church is full of hypocrites. Yep, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, you're right. It's full of broken people. It's full of people who...
Including you and I.
And that's why we go.
Yeah.
And it's because we can come together, we can edify one another, and I mean, talk about getting a boat close to the dock. You've got people sitting in the pews who aren't saved. They're sitting in the pews.
Yeah.
We have a mission field in our churches.
It's true.
We don't need to walk away from the church because somebody said something we don't like, or somebody believes something that we don't believe. You know, yes, if it's gospel issues that don't line up with biblical principles, then yeah, you may need to find another church. But if it's what style of music they play, if it's whether they have an Easter egg hunt or not,
yeah,
all of these things, we're dividing our churches all across this world over things like music. You know, David Hendricks, our great friend that used to help Run for God, who's passed on a few years back, he was actually the music minister at my church, and he said, Mitchell, music is dividing churches all over this country. And he's right. There's a lot of things dividing these churches all over this country. But think about going to church the same way if you're an instructor, or you've heard about how we've talked about being an instructor. Think of it as being the same thing.
Yeah.
Because when you go to church and you really get plugged in, you're plugged in at your church, I'm plugged in at my church, we both understand we get so much more out of church.
True.
By having a servant's heart rather than what can the church do for me. So
Amen.
I don't know. Stephanie's comment here just really rung my bell. It's some things that I've been thinking for a while. If you're not in a church, get in a church.
Yeah. You're talking about this, and I'm thinking about a great example. I've talked about my church on here before. Right now, we're like a snowball. I'm just gathering. I mean, it is incredible to watch right now what is going on in our church. We just had Vacation Bible School. There were hundreds of hours spent on props and making the place look cool and creating a cave in our church, and the setup was unbelievable, right? And that's what we do for Vacation Bible School at our church. And a lot of people would look at that and go, that's not really God stuff, right? And I get it. I understand what they're saying. At the same time, we had 18 kids who made professions of faith in our Vacation Bible School. I don't care how many hours or what it is that got them there. It got them there. It helped to get them there. And you're right. We have to stop. And when we don't agree with something, I'll be really transparent here. There was somebody in our church that really upset me a couple of years ago. And they knew it. And we hadn't talked a whole lot since then. We haven't been at each other's throats or anything like that. It's just like, it's like oil and water, right?
Right.
But that person spent more hours than anybody setting up for that, for this Vacation Bible School. And I knew how successful it was. I knew her heart. And I went to her afterwards and I just looked her in the eye and said, I just want you to know how much I appreciate what you've been doing and how hard you worked. I live by here. I've seen your car out there when nobody else was here. I don't know how many hours you spent here, but it was a lot, and it paid off, and God's using you, and it's awesome to see.
Yeah.
It was an opportunity. If all I did was be upset and not agree with what was going on and went the other way, I never would have noticed any of that. And that actually would have driven us further apart. Instead, the fact that we're in church and we're there regularly actually drew us right back together.
Yeah, and like I said, it so many times it comes down to preference. It comes down to things that don't really matter eternally.
Yeah.
I mean, last night I was at the band practice for our church, and I run the sound, and there was some people that were late. And you know how I am about being late, and I was flustered. And
yeah.
But at the end of the day, we're all there for the same reason. It's kind of like having the posture that you're not going to join a running club because there's people in that running club who think you should train different.
Yeah.
We don't do that. Right. We can draw those lines in other settings. We can show up to a running club and say, okay, Dean thinks you should run 100 miles a week, and I choose to train at 40 hours a week. And we can still talk and have a conversation, hug each other's neck because we're both there because we love running.
Right.
Why is it different in the church?
Shouldn't be.
Why do we get so hung up on the nuances of... I keep coming back to music because music over the past 10 years has just... we won't even go down that road, but we need to set our opinions aside and understand that we're all there because we love Jesus. Right. And yes, there's a lot of people there who don't know Jesus. And that is low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
They're in the building. They're there because they're searching for something. We need to put all of our petty differences aside and focus on shining the light of Jesus to people. I mean, how does it look okay, say the churches are 50% lost people. What does it look like to them when we're fighting and making these comments, that's not what I would do, and things like that? I mean, it's no wonder they leave the church.
Yeah. You're right.
Because who wants to be a part of that?
That's right.
So, point is, and I've got 4 fingers pointing back at me when I'm pointing at you and anybody on this podcast. Stop throwing rocks at the church.
Amen.
The church is, yes, it's an institution.
Yeah.
But institutions do a lot of good in many cases.
That's right.
And the church has done more good than just about any other institution in the history of our world. And if you're in a church that maybe doesn't line up with exactly what you believe and what you feel is scriptural, then by all means you need to move. But if it's because you're not being fed, You got to remember that if you're leaving a church for the wrong reasons, you go with you.
Yeah.
If the problem is your heart, that's not going to be fixed. Mm-hmm. And I want to really say here, I want to be very transparent that I'm just as convicted. I need to be hearing this as much as anybody listening to this podcast. So don't think that Mitchell's on his high horse pretending that he's holier than thou, because that is not the case. I told you I was going through this podcast this morning and I didn't get past this part.
Yeah.
God parked me here and convicted my heart about this, things that's going on in my life. But I also feel like this is a talk about a pandemic. This is a pandemic in our churches these days. So I'm going to stop right there and just say, have a servant's heart when you walk into your church this Sunday.
Amen. And
if you're not in a church, by all means find one, because it makes a huge difference in your walk with Christ.
It does. It does. Well, and I'll say one more thing. I think I don't agree with a lot of the stances that Facebook takes on things. However, Facebook is one of the chief vectors of growth over the years for Run for God. So
absolutely.
Yeah, without Facebook, who knows what would have ever happened? Might not be a Run for God today without it. And I'm not a Facebook fan at all. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of like that with the churches. Just because there's some things going on there you don't agree with doesn't mean that the overarching, that what you can do for the church and around the church and having that servant's heart, you can make a difference.
Because God uses failures to his glory too.
Amen.
My pastor and I were having a conversation just last night about you.
Yeah.
Because we were at Red Clay Resort in Cohutta and having a church, a little family night. And I was telling him about when you were running and the dog come after you, and you said something to those people that we've talked about that on this podcast.
Yeah.
And I said, Dean said something he shouldn't have said. And by the time he got back to his car, the Lord really just impressed on his heart. You need to go talk to those people. And I assumed the dog was somewhere in that area. And the reason I thought about it is there was a dog chasing him. Anyway.
Yeah.
And Charlie hit the nail on the head. He said, God will more times than not, he'll use our failures to shine his light. Yeah. And the church is full of broken, failed people, but he will use that.
Wow. Well, let's talk about our trivia question from last week. It was this: name the man who won the 1,500 meter races at the 1980 and 1984 Olympics, and tell me what he's doing these days. Did you know the answer to this one? Probably not.
No.
Oh, man.
I know the name. I didn't know him.
Yeah, one of my all-time favorites, Sebastian Coe. He was the best in the golden age of milers. Because back in the 80s, people don't know. Today we know some of the names. The people who are really good at that distance. Mm-hmm. And but back then there were so many, and the British folks had a ton of them, and they had Sebastian Coe, Steve Ovett, and Steve Cram. Steve Cram came a little after Coe and Ovett, but it was just fantastic to watch those guys go at each other regularly. And then, of course, Sebastian Coe, I think, was the best of the three. And, of course, Steve Cram was a little bit faster, but he was younger, and, you know how times go down over time. But after his track career, Sebastian Coe became a politician for a little while. Then he led the group that got the Olympics into London. And then he became vice president of the IAAF. That's the International Amateur Athletics Federation. And then he eventually became president of the IAAF, which is what he's doing today. He was part of the IAAF Hall of Fame when it was first created. He was one of the 24 people who was inaugurated into the IAAF. That's how big a deal he is. So many accomplishments, lifetime accomplishments that Sebastian Coe has. They call him, you got the whole royalty thing in Great Britain. So he's known as Lord Coe in Great Britain because he's been a big deal there. And he held the 800 meter world record for 16 years. And his record that he set in 1981 is still the third fastest 800 meters ever run.
Wow.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
He started running when he was 12. Kind of came onto the scene in 1977 when he won an indoor European championship in the 800. And then he had his first national record in 1977. And then this whole rivalry with Steve Ovett, it started way back in 1972. So what was cool about it is, and I guess if you knew it, it made it even neater to watch them run against each other in the Olympics in 1980 and 1984. It was cool because those two guys had been running against each other by that time for like over a decade, and they're still running against each other in the Olympics. So it was pretty cool. In 1979, he set 3 world records in 41 days. So he set the 800 world record at 142, the mile record at 348, and the 1500 record at 332 in a span of 41 days.
I think it's safe to say he was peaking right there.
Yes, he was. And he was ranked number 1 in the world at the 800 and the 1500. And I didn't realize this, but no other athlete has done that since. Nobody has been ranked. And you think about it today, we don't see many people doubling in the 800 and 1500 anymore. It was a big thing back then. Now you almost never see it. And then in 1980, he broke the world record for the 1,000 meters. And then in the Olympics that year, again, Coe won the 1500 and Ovett won the 800, which was ridiculous because Ovett was the better 50. Ovett had not lost a 1500 meter race in 3 years at this point, and Coe was the world record holder in the 800, and they won their opposite events. And if you ask Coe, he said that 800 meter race was tactically the worst race he'd ever run in his life, but he finished second. So that was interesting. And then, of course, in that 1981, when he ran that 141.73, that was just an unbelievable thing to run at that time. And again, if anybody runs under 142 now, everybody's talking about it because it's a big deal. And he did it in 1981. And then he had a serious illness for a couple of years and missed some stuff. And then he comes back in 1984 and he wins the Olympics again. He's still the only guy who has ever won back-to-back Olympics in the 1500 meters. You would think somebody, surely, and you would have thought, you see Ingebrigtsen today and you'd think Ingebrigtsen would have had a chance, but he didn't win it this year. So he ran in that 1500 meters. He ran the last 800 in 149. Wow. That's a fast 800. So, all sorts of crazy stuff. When he won that 1500 in the Olympics, he ran the last 1500 meters in 12.1 seconds.
He ran the what?
The last 100 meters. What did I say?
Oh, you said last 1500.
The last 100 meters in the 1500. He ran in 12.1 seconds. Wow. Can you imagine? I mean, I know he's not female, he's male, but on the female side, that's a world-class sprinting effort, 12.1 seconds for 100 meters, and he did it over the last 100 meters of the race. He had some crazy good speed. And he was fun to watch run because he was 5'9" and 119 pounds when he ran. So he was a very small guy. Yeah. In 800 meters, a lot of times the best guys are big, tall guys with long legs. But he was short and small, but he had a ton of speed. He's coached by his dad. So that was pretty cool.
So kind of off subject, but not really. Have you started reading the Atomic Habits book that we talked about last week?
I have not.
You need to, because actually later in the book he talks a lot about running, and he talks about Kipchoge, and I want to say that he mentions one of these other guys. That's why I brought it up, because maybe the Ovett guy.
Maybe so.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a great book. I'm going to plug it again this week because I finished it this week, and it's a great book. But so yeah. All right, so let's talk about the new website. I promised that it would be out in August, and we are going to launch it on August the 22nd. We're pretty much done with it right now. We've got a few things. We've got a few Run Club members in there. What I say is we gave them early access to go in there and try to break it.
Yeah.
And they've done a good job of it. Mm-hmm. So we're currently fixing some small issues. We just want it to be as close to perfect as we can get it when it launches. It's not going to. the first week or two when we launch it, there's going to be some issues found. So bear with us. It's a new website. Everybody goes through this, but we're trying to get it as close to perfect as possible when we launch it on the 22nd. So it's, again, the Run Club social. We've got several people in there already using that. It's
pretty good.
It's very good.
Yeah.
It's, I think it's going to, we've talked about the reasons I want to move away from Facebook with the group. And I think it's going to be a home run.
Yeah.
So this is I think this is the 15th when this is airing. So next Monday, the 22nd is when the runforgod.com, the new runforgod.com will launch. We will be sending correspondence out. There are a few things you're going to have to do. So don't be ignoring our emails, especially if you're a current Run Club member. There's some things that you're going to have to do. You're going to have to update your account to make the switch over. It's not complicated, but if you don't read the emails, then it's going to be confusing.
Yeah.
So, but if you read the emails, it's a few simple steps, 2 or 3 simple steps, and you'll be in and you'll be ready to go. So, keep a watch on your email. If you're a Run Club member, you will start getting correspondence this week. And then we're going to make the transition on the 22nd. And it's going to be awesome. I can't wait. It's
going to be exciting.
It's 10 steps up from where we currently are.
I don't know if I'll be on Facebook anymore after this.
Well, and that's the cool thing is there's so many people that aren't in the Run Club group because they're not on Facebook. Well, this is going to give them the avenue to be able to, we're going to see new faces that we've maybe never saw.
Yeah.
Because they're not on Facebook. And for whatever reasons, I get it. You know, I am on Facebook and I will probably remain on Facebook after this, but I get it if you're not on Facebook. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah. I can't wait.
If your teen is into rock and metal music that makes your ears bleed and your grandmother clutch her pearls, we can help. If your spouse yearns for music from the old days and wants to relive the music of their glory years, we can handle that. If you need a break from the day to spend time with God and recognize His goodness, we'd love to be a part of that. Whether it's rock and metal, classic songs from decades past, or heartfelt worship music, J Radio has you covered. Sign up for an account at jradio.com and download the app in your app store to start listening for free today.
All right, we're back, and if you're not tuning in on Thursday nights, you need to do that. And this is another thing. You just mentioned the website and how the website will pull you away from Facebook if you're not a Facebook fan. Well, this is the same thing that goes for Thursday nights. Thursday nights have always been on Facebook, and now it's going to be directly through our
and the other thing
website.
it's through the website or through the app. We now have a Run for God app that you'll be able to download when you make your transition. And the Thursday night lives, that's one of the comments we had. I had a Zoom meeting with the 5 that are on there night before last, and one of the comments was they really like how the Facebook Live, once you end the live, the video drops down and they're all archived right there on that same page. So, because we have a lot of people that say, "Hey, Dane, you talked about something, whatever, 2 months ago. How do I find it?" Well, it's not easy on the Facebook group. Well, now we've got a whole page that's dedicated to Facebook Live. It archives everything. You can search it. If it's, Dean talked about shoes, you can type in shoes and it'll pull that video up. So, cool. It's really, really, really good.
Pretty cool. Well, have you ever struggled with weight?
I have.
Yeah. I remember at one point in time, I being a little over 30 pounds heavier than I am today. And I can see, because I remember it, and I can see how people let their weight get out of control. The thing that helped me is the unique position that I was in was I saw first of all, my brother, who literally weighs twice as much as I do. And my mother struggled with her weight her whole life. And seeing that, I realized when I hit 180 pounds, I know that doesn't sound like much to most people. I get it. But my attitude was I got there a little bit at a time. And when I hit that, I was like, I'm not going any further. And I immediately
So that was your atomic number.
That was my number. Yeah, that was it. And it changed me. And I did it because of what I had seen before. I just didn't want to go through all the things that my mother just struggled with it so much her whole life. But then what happened was, I think I was 44 at the time. I got a stress fracture in my femur, and I had to take 3 months off of running. And so as soon as I stopped running for that next 30 days, what do you think happened? Nothing.
You kept eating like you were running.
I did, but I gained no weight.
Yeah.
But then the next 30 days after that, I gained 20 pounds in 30 days. And the reason is because this is something important to understand about metabolism. Mm-hmm. Metabolism doesn't slow down as soon as you stop running. Mm-hmm. It takes time. But then I remember when I went back to running, it took a long time to get it started back up. And it was so hard to run with those extra pounds on me. But I did it by being consistent and just keep on going. And if you'll do that, you'll get that metabolism back to going again. So I say all of that because this week's story talks a little bit about weight, and it has a little bit of a different kind of title. This one comes from Alice Rhines, and it's called "You're the Fittest Fat Person I Know." Have you ever been told this? I have countless times. I have been an athlete all my life. I started dancing when I was 3 years old and continued until I finished my high school career. I played basketball, volleyball. I even tried cheerleading. I downhill skied, raced, and instructed. However, the sport I fell in love with was soccer. I played year-round. Yes, even in Minnesota. I didn't become a runner, though, until I was about 22. After I blew out my second ACL in 2006, I knew I had to be done with contact sports, but I knew I couldn't be done with exercise. See, all along this journey, I was always overweight for my age group, so running made sense. My high school cross-country team used to joke that the soccer team ran almost more than they did, which was true. Though I was never fast, I could always just run. The coach gave a distance, and no matter how long it took, I would complete it. At first, it was just to try to keep my exercise up, but it quickly became my devotional time. Well, before children, it became my time where I heard God the loudest, whether I was looking for an answer to something or just needed that fatherly pat on the back. Fast forward to 2010, and my world was falling apart. I was now living in Florida, and my then husband said he was done with our marriage. At this point, I had run a lot of 5Ks and a 4-miler, but nothing more. As the feelings got more overwhelming, I took to the pavement even more, and I started getting the idea that I wanted to run a half marathon. Well, that got a nice chuckle out of me. Sure, it would be one of those bucket list items that you never cross off, I thought. At best, I am running a 16-minute mile for one of the 3 miles in a 5K, and the rest are slower. In addition, I'm close to 100 pounds overweight. Yet every time I went for a run, this thought kept creeping in until God finally said, okay, let me see if I can get you to believe you can do this. And he put Feather in my life. Feather and I worked together, and slowly we became running buddies and best friends. We ran at the same pace and were at the same spot in our training. She also wanted to run a half marathon, but knew she couldn't do the training on her own. We worked our way up to a 10K, and then in 2013, we ran our first half marathon. Including that one, I have finished 4 half marathons and gotten picked up twice at 2 Disney half marathons. My fastest one to date at 4 hours and 30 minutes. I finished my last half a year and 3 weeks after my son was born. In this process, I had also met my wonderful husband, and he supported me through all of it. But I was wrecked after the last one, and each one seemed to get worse. He finally told me he thought I needed to back off and stay at the 10K or shorter. He said, your body just doesn't like more. And he was right. Okay, so I know you're still wondering about this title. Through all of this, besides following different training plans, one at a time, not picking pieces from each, I also followed different diet or healthy eating plans. None of them worked. And it's not just me saying that. I have an aunt who is a nurse who I would send my food logs and exercise logs to. I posted to social media to hold myself accountable. I went to different support groups. I was still seeing my counselor, who was also a long distance runner, after my divorce, and we talked about it. And I worked with my doctor for over 8 years. Finally, in 2018, my doctor said, I've never had a patient try harder. There is nothing else out there for us to try. You need to consider weight loss surgery. I left her office and cried in my car for about 20 minutes before I could drive home. I didn't want to take the easy way out. My husband and I talked about it, prayed about it, and then he went off and did his research. He loves his research. We finally decided to make the initial appointment and then see how we felt. I say we because even though I was having the surgery, it changes a lot of things for the entire family. To make a long story shorter, I had the gastric sleeve surgery in 2019. Has it been easy? Well, no, not even close. But it was as hard as some of our research, was it as hard as some of our research and conversations with others led us to believe it would be? Nope, not even close. For the most part, my taste didn't change, with the exception of plain water. I have to add some type of flavor to it. I have had no issues with any food. Most patients' taste changes from this surgery. Due to the years of trying to do it with just diet and exercise, we were already eating 80% of the time as close to not processed, natural as we could get. Every meal was balanced with protein, carbs, fat, and veggies. It has been just over 2 years and I've kept off 115 pounds and began the Run for God Couch to Marathon program in January. My husband and I have agreed to one caveat, that if my body starts to not handle it again, I won't push to the full marathon. But so far, so good. On top of that, something I have never been able to do, even in all my soccer days, I am getting faster. I just ran the 1 mile tempo run at 12:26, and my 10K long runs have been averaging 14:45 to 15:15. All along the way, I have continued to share my journey on social media. Though it hasn't always been easy, because the journey isn't easy, this keeps me accountable. The feedback I have received from people who have said, you have inspired me to start doing XYZ because I've seen what you have been doing. That tells me God has a message to send through me.
Wow. You know, I see these stories sometimes and I want to put a face to the name. So I went on Alice's Facebook page. I'm looking at it right now, and wow.
Yeah.
I mean, her journey, you flip back a matter of just 10 pictures and you see the journey she's been on. So Alice, hats off to you. I mean, this is incredible what you've done. And the fact that you've been so transparent through it, there again, the fact that she shared her story, I have no doubt that this story right here is going to ring true with a lot of people out there listening. So kudos to you for, number one, doing it, and then number two, sharing it, because it's important.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's important for us to understand that the fact that this was a really hard journey for her is the key to the whole thing. And all the things that we go through, or these struggles, can be so incredible in the end. Right. Not just for us, if we're the ones struggling, but for others, because as you look through that Facebook page, you know, it's inspiring to see that. And 115 pounds is just... I remember the 20 pounds that I had on me, and I remember how hard it was. I can't imagine that much. It's crazy.
She found her want to button.
Yes, she did.
Talked about, for sure.
Scripture, Philippians 4:13. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Of course, that's that classic verse. We've talked about this one several times before, and Paul is saying that he can be content in all things. So let's read the prior verses to that. It says, I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength.
You know, I think we've talked about this before. You can be content in whatever situation you're in, but still be striving for something. I think people get that mixed up in that, okay, well, if you're content, then you should just stay where you're at. That's not what this is saying. You know, I think that Alice was content with where she was. You could hear it in her readings that she had resolved herself. She said that the doctor didn't want her doing more than 10K, and he was right. Mm-hmm. She was content, but she still had this idea in her head that I want more. You can. I don't know how else to say it other than I can be content. I've started running a little bit again. You know, I kind of got tired of walking and I want to run some more. I'm content with where I'm at today. Mm-hmm. I'm content with my health. But I'm not complacent.
Yeah.
And there's a difference.
Big difference.
I'm happy. I have joy. I feel like my time with the Lord is where it needs to be right now. So I am content. But I still want to run a half marathon this fall.
Yeah.
And that those are not mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. You can have drive and contentment at the same time. Where the danger comes is when complacency comes into the picture. And I think that's exactly where Alice was. She had a drive. She had the want to, but it seemed, at least from what I was reading, that she was happy with where she was. She was content, but she wanted more. And I think that's what Paul is saying.
Yeah.
Paul was content even in prison, but he wasn't complacent.
Right.
He was still doing everything he could do to share the gospel of Jesus Christ, even if that meant doing it from a jail cell. He was going to do it with joy, and that is true. That is true contentment, striving for what you want in the future while being happy and joyful and content in the moment. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah, well, I'm going to share a really good example here in my story in a little while, and the truth is, I didn't reach the goals that I had set for myself. I reached one, but there were a couple other goals I had that I wanted to reach that I didn't reach.
Right.
And in the past, it would have been really upsetting to me.
It would have wrecked you.
Yes. But in this case, when I got through, I was content. Mm-hmm. And again, I'll talk about that some more. But what am I thinking? Well, I'm thinking next year I'm going to do better, right? I want more. I want to do better, and I think I still can do better. But for this year, what happened was what happened, and I'm content with what happened.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm trying to figure out the best way to say it. Maybe it's that I believe that contentment is being happy and having joy where you're at, but striving to do better.
Yeah.
Complacency is being happy with where you're at and saying, I'm just going to stay here.
Yeah.
And that's not what God, especially in our walk with Christ. That is not what God wants. He wants us to be content where we are, but growing our faith with Him in the process. Complacency is saying, I'm good right here, God. I'm not going to grow anymore.
Yeah.
That's never good.
Nope. Matthew 5:14-16, the New Living Translation says this: "You are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand, where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father." I love this thought. This is right after your salt and light. This was after the salt verses, and we're to be different, and we're to be noticeably different. And I think about it like a lighthouse. When you have a light, why do you have a lighthouse? Well, you have a lighthouse so that people don't. It helps you avoid danger, and lighthouses are meant to be seen. They're purposefully put in places to be seen. And that's kind of the way we are. As we say, I say it at the end of every podcast, where we should shine our light. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, for me even, I have a hard time doing that because I want people to think I'm bragging or anything like that. So I'm real cognizant of that. But at the same time, we're to be noticed by people around us that we're different than other people, and that's important.
Yeah, I think there's two ends of the spectrum here. I think you have people who, like you just said, they're very self-conscious. Maybe they're shy. Maybe they're not outspoken, whatever, and they just shy away from being the light. And then you have the other side, which is the cocky side. Yeah. And, you know, we used to always tell the kids there's a difference between confidence and cockiness.
Yeah.
Cockiness will get you in bad trouble with the coach.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with being confident, and we need to be confident in our walk with Christ. We should not. That's why this verse is here. We have the answer to eternal glory.
Yeah.
Joy for eternity. We should let people see that. You know, a lighthouse stands there confidently, but a lighthouse is not standing up there saying, "Look at me," and you know, whatever. There's just a difference in being. We need to be right there in the middle. We don't need to be shying away from the spotlight, because if it's things that point people to Christ, we don't need to put it under a basket. We need to let people know. But on the same token, sometimes and I say we because I do it too, we take it too far the other way and say, look, it becomes about what I've done and not about what Christ has done in me. So yeah, I love that verse for that reason, that it kind of says, stay right there in the middle.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about light, and I hadn't really thought about this much, and I'm sure that it's been discussed in the past. I was listening to an audiobook called Amazing Truths, and it was talking about how a lot of our scientific discoveries fall right in line with Christian scripture.
Sure.
And he talked about light. And in that, he was talking about how, you know, light, whenever something approaches the speed of light, when you get to the speed of light, mass becomes infinite. It's the craziest thing that you've ever heard, but if we were able to run at the speed of light, we would suddenly become infinite as far as size, right? So we can't run that fast. That's why nothing can travel the speed of light. And maybe that's a good reason not to run faster, because the faster you run, the bigger you get, right? So light is infinite. So this is what's interesting to me, is that the way God is described as light in the Bible so many times, when the Bible was written, nobody knew that light and the speed of light became infinite, and that light was infinite, but God knew when he was writing it. And there's so many truths in the Bible like that I think we miss all the time. And I thought that was
never heard that. That's
I thought that was an interesting
God
fact.
is light.
God is light.
Therefore, God is infinite,
right?
In his wisdom, in his size, in his thoughts, which is why there's things that we'll just never understand, because we have a finite mind.
That's right.
Never heard that.
Yeah.
That's good.
Zechariah 4:6-7 and verse 10, New Living Translation again. Then he said to me, "This is what the Lord says to Zerubbabel. It is not by force nor by strength, but by my Spirit, says the Lord of heaven's armies. Nothing, not even a mighty mountain, will stand in Zerubbabel's way. It will become a level plain before him. And when Zerubbabel sets the final stone of the temple in place, the people will shout, 'May God bless it! May God bless it!' Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin, to see the plumb line in Zerubbabel's hand."
I just like to say that name, Zerubbabel.
Yeah.
I mean, this kind of goes back to what you just said. I mean, the Lord, God made these statements in those days that it was, I don't care if you put a mountain in front of me. Mm-hmm. And he's shown time after time through history. I think about, you said you walked around your house like the walls of Jericho. I mean, I think so many times we read these stories and we, even as believers, we kind of put these stories. This is going to sound terrible, but we allow them in our mind to kind of slip to that fictional.
Yeah.
It's a story, But these aren't stories.
Yeah.
They really happened. And man, it goes to the power and the infinity that you just said of God. And who are we to even attempt to stand in the way? We're nothing.
Yeah.
We're nothing to stand in the way of God's plan.
Well, and the root of this verse too, I love, because he's talking about a vision that he had, and this vision had a lampstand, and then it had these two pipes that went from an olive tree to the lampstand. In other words, it was saying the oil to keep that light flowing is constant and always connected. And that's the way God is for us, is that we're always connected. And again, we just talked about light and its properties. Well, what about the properties of oil? Well, oil heals. It lubricates, it lights, it warms, it can invigorate, like in a massage. It can be perfume. It can even polish metal. Oil can do so many things, and that's the way God is for us. He's versatile and can do whatever he can supply every need. Is the way it talks about it in the Bible. And then this final verse of the small things. And how important the small things are. I think about it from about our fitness. We've got the base period where we just do long, slow miles just to get ourselves into a good state of fitness so we can start working our body harder. God really delights in seeing us get started. But we don't like to just get started often. Or we get excited and then we loses. But it's all those small things along the way that are so important. In the case of Alice's story here, there's a lot of steps along the way that were important to the overall successful spot that she's in today. She had to go through a lot of small things. I say small. I mean, for her, they were big things, but a lot of little things that she tried. She said they tried everything. Well, those are all little things that you tried along the way that didn't work. Those things are important.
You know, it's funny you said that. Actually, I finished that book yesterday, the Atomic Habits book, and this is one thing he talks about. He's talking about in the case of the book, he's talking about great athletes, and he said great athletes don't become great because they've learned how to handle the adversity, the hard workouts, all that. They've learned how to handle boredom. And he goes to explain that the greatest athletes are great at doing the daily things that are just mundane. I was thinking about with Lane and Landon and a lot of our athletes, the doing the ice baths, the massages, all we call them the little things.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to hear him talk about it's because we can amp ourselves up to deal with the hard things, but it's hard when it gets boring.
Yeah.
I mean, just to go out for a 4-mile run when the weather's just okay and you just feel okay and it's just kind of boring. Those are the workouts that a lot of times you can kick to the curb.
Yep.
But the greatest athletes, and you can put this in the realm of our walk with Christ. You know, we can all get amped up for a great sermon, but you got a busy day and you need to get up and be in the Word at 5 o'clock in the morning and you're tired and you just want to stay in the bed. That's what really grows your walk.
Yeah.
Is those times where you do it anyway.
That's right. Yeah. First question. Have you ever felt stuck in a situation that you knew you were doing all the right things to get out of, but it just didn't work, and only in hindsight do you see how God used you by keeping you there?
Yes.
All the time.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I talked recently about being unemployed, and in the moment, you don't see God in the moment, but you look back at it and you see God's fingerprints all over it. And that goes to so many things. And that's the key, is that we don't see it in the moment, and we have to have the faith that when we're going through tough times and things aren't good, that something good is going to come from it. And it's really, really difficult to do that, isn't it?
Well, and it's where we really, I'm 100% convinced that God will allow us to get there, because that's where we get to the end of ourselves. You know, I've talked on here, you know, my family, we were on the brink of financial calamity. at one point after the 2008 recession. And I mean, I've talked about the midday visits to my church and being sitting in a dark sanctuary, and that's where this ministry was born. And so, yeah, I mean, and I know it's easy to say it, because chances are in the next 5 years, it'll be another situation. I'll be there again, and I'll have to come back and listen to these podcasts to hear myself say, sometimes those are where the biggest blessings happen.
Yeah.
But it's so hard in those moments when you feel like you're doing everything right, like Alice talks about. She was doing everything right.
Yeah.
But man, what a story she has now.
Yeah.
And had she not gone through all that, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it.
That's right.
So just remember that, and I say that to myself too. Yeah. Mitchell, remember this next time.
Yeah.
Because we're going to have more deep valleys. No question about it.
Yep.
But this is where the wisdom comes in. This is why God allows us to go through these things, so that hopefully next time the valley may be as deep, but we look at it differently.
Yeah. Another question. Looking back, have you ever done something that seemed small, insignificant, or maybe even like a failure that turned out to be a lesson or a tool you need to complete something much bigger later? Yeah, I mean, again, I mentioned the being unemployed, and I had the same job for 25 years, and I look at all of the stuff that surrounded that, and the things that I was doing during that summer, and how everything, there were a lot of little things that led to a moment where God said, all right, I'm done allowing you to feel sorry for yourself. Now I need you to pick yourself up and head in a direction. And a lot of those little things that I did at that time just made huge difference in where I am today and who I am today. And that's what Alice here, that's what she's doing. She didn't give in at any point. She kept trying these things. And then even when she found what eventually sounds like it's the solution, she was saying, I didn't want to take the easy way out. She was still thinking it can't be that this thing is the answer. But it was, but she never would have gotten there had she not gone through all those other little things and little steps along the way.
Yeah.
And in the end, it was worth it. And last question, what has been your biggest struggle, maybe even what you thought you were failing at, that God used to inspire others? You know, I think about I've talked on here before about my temper and how my temper used to be so bad. And I've been through a lot because of my temper. I failed a lot because of my temper. But God has changed me, and now I have this opportunity to be able to talk to others about that and to explain that I understand. People who never have a bad temper don't understand people who do, because they don't. Why would you let these things get under your skin to the point where you fly out? They don't understand it, right? And I get that, because I don't understand people, other personalities that other people have that aren't what I do. So in order to get through to somebody who is struggling with that, it needs to be somebody who understands that struggle. It's no different than an alcoholic. Somebody who's been an alcoholic and recovered can talk to somebody who's in it, and they're way more impactful. And it goes that way for all of us, right? For anything that we do.
Yeah. We as a family, in the past month, we all took these, Holly read a book. It's about the Enneagram. You've ever heard of the Enneagrams? Have you ever heard of that? Well, it's kind of a personality test.
Okay.
And there's 1 through 9 personalities. And she read this book, and she was telling us about it one night at dinner, and me and the boys were like, oh, we got to take that test to figure out what we are. And so we all took the test, and it is amazing how dead on these tests are.
Yeah.
But I'm an Enneagram 1. And Enneagram 1 is, perfectionist, all these different things. I would have thought that this Enneagram was written for Mitchell Hollis. But it was so funny because she got to reading it, and you know how I am. You see me even on this podcast. If you're watching, I'm getting the cup just right on the table, and the pen's got to be where it needs to be. And she said that she was reading it, and it said an Enneagram 1 doesn't go looking for imperfections. Imperfections attack them.
Yeah.
And I was like, dead on.
Yeah.
So that's my personality.
Yeah.
But that's still no excuse for the way I act sometimes. And I think that's where that may be the problem with some of these personality tests and things like that. You hear people say, well, that's just the way I was raised. Well, it doesn't have to be the way you live.
That's right.
I guarantee you, if you took an Enneagram test, it would say Dean has a short fuse.
Yeah.
But Dean don't have to live like that.
That's right.
And we have to stop falling into these traps of, well, that's how I was raised, or that's what I've always done. I love what Dave Ramsey says. He says, find your sacred cows and shoot them.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that gets us in trouble a lot of times that, I've got a temper, that's just the way I am. So, yeah, I've seen it in you through the years. When you first started here, you were a bit of a hothead. Mm-hmm. And, you still get that way when it comes to technology. But, yeah, I love that thought that, so many times when we make changes in our life like that, when we really stop and do that, so many people notice.
Yeah.
And that's a testament to what God can do. God can change any Enneagram.
Yeah, that's right.
But we've got to allow it.
That's right. Thank you, Alice. Great story.
Sure.
Do you struggle with motivation to exercise? Are you looking for something that will challenge you and inspire and motivate you? The Run for God Run Club is just what you need to get off the couch and on your way to a fitter, healthier you. Stop trying to get into better shape and do it. With the help and inspiration of thousands of others who are going through the same challenges you face. Whether you're participating in the Couch to Marathon Challenge or just looking for a daily pick-me-up to get active, join the Run for God Run Club today. You can join for as little as 27 cents a day. So what are you waiting for? Get started today at www.runforgod.com. All right, we're back, and I think I may have talked about this last year, about this same time. These masters meets that we go to, these national championship meets, they're just so inspirational. You go, and you've got these people who are just, honestly, it's people really, they have no business doing some of these things, and they're doing them anyway.
Yeah.
And it's so inspirational to watch that. We had a run club member show up at the national championships.
Yeah, I saw the pictures of that.
Yeah. If you're on Facebook, you know her as Missy Mosquito.
Yeah.
And her and her son showed up. And, man, it was pretty cool because I didn't see them before the race. But when I was running, I heard my name from the stands.
Really?
And so it was pretty cool to hear my name from the stands. And it was definitely helpful. So, and we were in Lexington, Kentucky. Now, I've been there a few times for races. I never really paid quite as much attention as I did, I think, this time to Lexington. We kind of had a day where we didn't do a whole lot in between two races. And also the other couple times I was there was in December. So you don't get a chance to see much in December when it's so cold. But Lexington's a nice place.
Yeah, I've been there a couple times.
Really like Lexington. So, and of course, it's always great to hang out with my wife because we just like just hanging out. Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool. And I figured out I'm in the wrong age group.
Really?
Yeah, because I looked at the results, and so there were 18 people in my age group. Now, that's really weird that there's 18 people in one race. In this 1,500 meter race that I was in. That's a lot in a 5-year age group. But the 10th place finisher in the 55 to 59 age group would have finished third in the 50 to 54 age group.
Really?
Yes. So, yeah, I was in the...
So you had a bunch of Schellenbergers in there with you.
We had some fast guys. Yeah. But that's cool. And then, of course, after the race, we went to Buc-ee's.
Yeah.
And I've been last few weeks, I've been really good on my diet, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to get away from, and had me that brisket sandwich. Yeah.
They're good. They know how to do brisket at Buc-ee's.
They did a good job with it for sure. Not as good as yours, but pretty good. And then we met this guy. So listen to this. This is really cool. So we're in the parking lot. We're leaving. My race is over. I've done my cool down. We're just walking to the car. And there's this guy walking out through the parking lot as well. And he goes, "Hey, would you mind giving me a ride to my hotel?" And I thought, that's a pretty bold thing just to ask somebody out of the blue that you don't know. But then I thought, why did he ask?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he needed a ride, but past that. And I thought, because we're all runners, we're all, and he knew he was safe to ask, "Hey, can I ride with you guys?" And of course we took him back to his hotel, and super, super nice guy, shared some training things with me. He turns out he is a world-class runner in his age group, the 45 to 49 age group, I think. Maybe it was 40 to 44. But anyway, his name is Mark Williams. Great guy. And he's got a running streak that started almost the same time mine did.
Really?
Yeah. And but he's super fast. He's just a couple of years ago ran sub 2 for 800.
Wow.
Yeah, he's that fast. So he won his 1,500 meter race. I think the next guy was probably close to 200 meters behind him.
So let me ask you this, because I'm trying to figure out how to ask this. When you think about older people, and when I say older people, I'm saying beyond college, take the professionals out of it, and run club members. We're in the sport for distance running. And when I say distance running, that could be a 5K. You know, we all have aspirations of doing a 5K all the way up to an ultra marathon. And we have training plans for that. But the typical guy, 44-year-old Mark Williams, what kind of training does he do to specialize in the 800? You just don't go to a normal race and talk to people and say, "Oh, I specialize in the 800." Yeah, that's kind of, I always equate track, besides you, I always equate track to professionals or college and below. I don't know. I guess it's a different world. I don't know anybody besides you that trains for track events.
But there's literally thousands of them out there.
Really?
There just aren't many in our area. And we're scattered around the country.
Yeah.
And that's who this guy is.
But what does his normal week look like? This guy that's so good at the 800, 44 years old, what does his normal week look like?
Well,
does it look like he's training for a 5K?
No, it looks like he's training for a 1,500. I mean, he's a specific middle distance guy.
Okay.
And I mean, he runs a 53 400.
Wow.
You know, at over 40 years old, so he's a pretty fast guy. And yeah, matter of fact, it's interesting that you say that, because you know how this is awesome the way God works, right? So just before this guy asks us if he could get a ride, I'm talking with Debbie and I'm telling her, I'm lamenting the fact that I worked really hard for this weekend to get ready for the steeplechase and to be ready for jumping over the barriers and stuff. And I was successful in that, but I didn't do much speed training. I was talking to her about how I've got to do better speed training. And in walks Mark, and he starts sharing with me. And he says, let me find you on Facebook. I share all of my workouts, and you can just take a look at my workouts and see what I'm doing. And so now we're Facebook friends, and I'm going to learn how he gets to run a 408 mile.
Well, you'll have to send him this podcast. So we sit and talk about him.
Yeah. We need to do that for sure. So anyway, really, really great guy, and interesting that it comes up right after I was talking about that. And so we had just had a bunch of good stories from this weekend. And here's one of them, because it is time for Dean's Thoughts. That's a time when I share something that I've written about the intersection between running and faith. So how many times have we seen God surprise us with how he works things out? Well, this story is called God Goes One Better. I love to challenge myself. In 2021, I decided to try something I had never done, the 3,000 meter steeplechase. I loved it. I won the national championship for my age and decided I wanted to go back and try it again the following year. In addition, I had only been 36 seconds away from the American record. I thought with more specific training and maybe a little better fitness, I'd love to give that record a run for its money. It would be difficult for sure, but it was worth the effort. So I stepped to the line in 2022 knowing it would take a perfect race, but hopeful nonetheless. I'd worked hard and felt like I had done all the things I needed to do to give the record a run. The gun went off, and by the end of the first lap, I found myself all alone in the lead, and I was on pace for the first 3 laps of the 7.5 lap race. There are 5 hurdles per lap for a total of 35 jumps over the last 7 of those laps. The announcer had found out from a friend of mine that I was shooting for the record, so he was calling out my splits every lap to encourage me and the crowd. It was a nice touch and was much appreciated. At exactly halfway through, on the 18th barrier, I caught my trail foot and fell. Sprawled out on the track with a bruised left palm, a bloody right knee, and a sore left knee. I thought very briefly about not getting up, but everything seemed to be okay and to keep on going. I got up quickly and resumed running at the front of the race. By the time I went through the first mile, I was 7 seconds off my goal pace. It appeared the fall had cost me at least 5 seconds. That may not sound like much, but it is a much tougher barrier to overcome than the one that had just knocked me down. I faded over the second half of the race, but held on to win my race. I had been knocked down and got back up to finish the race. I thought, that's a good story about God's ability to allow us to fall, but giving us the opportunity to be resilient. I could have written that story, and it would have been great. But God didn't stop there. As I walked off the track after the race, I saw the announcer who was set up in the corner of the track. I stopped by to thank him for his encouragement. He told me he was impressed with the way I got back up after what looked like to him to be a pretty hard fall. Then he asked if I would do a live interview. Of course, I don't usually shy away from a microphone. During the interview, I was able to testify to the fact that it is God who powers my running and my ability to get back up. He was the one who made sure I could keep going. Isn't that just like God? He writes a great story and then takes it one step further by making sure that his children have the ability to give him credit for his greatness. What an awesome God. Sometimes things don't come out the way we plan. Sometimes we fall short. But God never falls short. We say it all the time. There are often good things that come from unfortunate events. In this case, God got a shout out because of a fall. If I had not fallen, I would not have had the opportunity. If my friend had not mentioned it to the announcer, he would not have been calling out the splits, and I would not have stopped by his table. Our God is an awesome God. The way he coordinates things is incredible. When things don't go as planned, are you looking for opportunities to count it as joy anyway? I can't help but think about this. Years ago, I would have been angry for falling on that barrier. My sulking would have made me unlikely to have stopped and thanked the announcer, and God would never have gotten that shout out. I don't want to meddle, and I myself have missed many opportunities while wallowing in self-pity. But have you missed opportunities to give God credit because you were focused on yourself and your disappointment? I'd say most of us have. But what are you going to do next time?
That's a great story, Dean. First of all, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. This was just one of those times you look back on it and you just see how God works things out. And in the moment, I felt like I should have pushed harder in the race, and I was really not happy to some degree when I finished. As I crossed the line, I realized there was a little more left than there should be at the end of a race. I felt like I didn't really, I don't know. There were a lot of factors that got in the way in that race. I was distracted heavily before the race. So things didn't go right in my warm up and stuff because of that. And I won't, I'm not pointing fingers or anything like that it was the accumulation of things.
Sure.
That got me to that point. But even with that, I was still content, just like we just talked about, that, that the race had come out okay. And we took this big picture with, I don't know, there were probably 10 of the guys that were in the race, all arms around each other, taking this picture that Debbie took. No way would I have taken that picture 10 years ago, because I would have been off in the corner somewhere, really mad at myself. And but here I was smiling for a picture at a time when I wasn't as excited about my performance as maybe I should have been or could have been, right? And then the race was cool because I had several meet officials. One of the guys came almost running up to me after the race. He says, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I thought that was really nice. And then I walked a little further around the track. Another meet official said, "Are you okay?" I mean, they were just like falling all over themselves just to make sure.
Yeah.
It's really cool to be a part of something where it's not just about the races, and it is about the races, but it's not just about that. People were just nice people, just wanting to help out and be nice about it. It's just such a great thing to be a part of. And I know you're not a track fan, but man, I could sit and watch it. The 1,500, just the 1,500 meters, right? In all the age groups went on for hours.
Well, I was going to say, I went to the one race that you did in Ames, Iowa.
Yeah.
The track race. Now, I could sit and watch those all day. I would rather watch that than watch the professionals.
Yeah.
Because the stories.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the picture that I have of Lane with that lady. She was 94.
Yeah.
And she had just won the 100-meter dash or something.
Yeah.
I mean, tiny lady. I'm trying to remember her name. This whole podcast, I've been trying to remember this lady's name.
Yeah.
I knew we were going to talk about this. But, yeah, I mean, I'm a track fan when it comes to Masters Nationals? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
The Masters.
Yeah.
To see all those folks doing things that people say they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
That's inspiring.
Yeah. It's cool.
It's we could have a year's worth of podcast just out of one of those meets.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk about this. You talk about getting back up, and, people were complimenting me for getting back up and finishing the race. And honestly, it wasn't that hard to get back up. It was an automatic thing for me to get back up and to continue regardless of what had happened. It's kind of built in to me. But, I think a lot of people look at that and they go, "I wish I was wired that way." But the truth is I think we can all become wired that way if we want to. I remember this thing that happened to me when I was a kid. And I don't know that I've ever talked about this in public ever. My mother went to her grave never knowing this happened. I was coming home from school. I believe I was an 8th grader. And I was coming home from school. I was riding my bike. And a big guy, he's a football player, he was walking with some other folks. He stopped me on my bike. He was walking home and I was riding home. He stopped me on my bike, kind of put his front wheel between his legs and faced me. And he hit me in the face just for fun because he wanted to be a big guy for his friends that were there, right? And I remember that. Again, I never told anybody because on my way home, obviously a lot of thoughts go through your mind with something like this. Pretty traumatic thing to happen to a kid who's,
sure.
I don't know how old I was, 15, 14 years old, 13 years old, something like that. And I decided that I wasn't going to tell anybody about what had happened and that I was going to going to get back at this guy. But I wasn't going to do it physically because I knew physically that was just going to escalate things. That wasn't going to end well, right? And so a physical ending wasn't going to be good. But I hear what wound up happening, obviously, is I found track and I found my place. I really didn't have a place up to that point. I found track that next year and found my place. And of course, by the time I graduated from high school, that kind of thing didn't happen to me because everybody knew who I was and all of that. I hear a lot of things about bullying. This was classic bullying, right? And I think too many times today we take, and please don't hear me say what I'm not saying. But I think too many times we play up the victim instead of figuring out how to not let that happen again. You know what I mean? And I think if you're struggling in circumstances, there's a song, and I think it's the group Train, and it's called Words. And it says, words, and it talks about using them as firewood and let them burn. When people say things and they do things, take those incidences, take those things that really discourage you and use them as firewood. Light those things on fire and let them get you fired up to overcome whatever that obstacle is. And I think that one incident that happened to me so many years ago was the reason why I could get back up off that track so quickly, because I made a decision at that point that I wasn't going to let the things that could knock me off my game knock me off my game. And I don't know. It's just, a lot of people say, well, that's easy for you to say. You found this running thing. Everybody's got something. And it wasn't easy when it happened. I can take you back to that day. I can take you to the spot. I guarantee you, within 2 feet, I could probably show you the spot on the road where my bike was sitting when that guy hit me to this day, because I can remember it that well. It was traumatic, but it really helped me a lot in life. And
the crazy weird thing is, I'm sitting here and I think I know the answer to this question before I ask it. Would you have it done any other way now?
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. No, because it really did fuel a lot. That moment in time went through my head, and there were other things that happened, but this one was just so, the reason it was done was just for fun, and so it was way more traumatic than, you're walking down the hallway and somebody says something, or it was so in your face, literally in this case, that there was no reason for it whatsoever. Yeah. And it was complete. When you talk about the word unfair, you can't put a definition of unfair that's more than that one. I didn't even know this guy. He didn't know me. He picked me out at random. It's not a lot unlike these, you see these knockout game things that you see on the internet where somebody just walks up to a guy and just knocks him out. It was a lot like that. And yeah, if you're out there and you're struggling with something, find a way to take that incident that happened to you 5 years ago that you can't get off of your mind. Find a way to use that as firewood to really light your fire about something and overcome that thing. It can be done. Because
you're right. We can get so focused on the thing.
And the unfairness of it.
And the unfairness of it and the, whatever, that we don't see how God wants to use it. Because God will use it. Mm-hmm. But we got to turn it. We got to turn it over to Him. So many times we keep it in a box and we put it on our nightstand and we want to think about it every night and think about how unfair it was every night and get mad about it. And the best thing you can do is turn it over to God and say, okay, it happened. There's nothing I can do. It happened. Mm-hmm. But how am I going to let that change me going forward? And that's what you did.
Yeah.
So kudos to you. I've never heard that story. Yeah. Sounds like nobody's ever heard that story.
Yeah. No, they haven't. Until now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, whatever that thing is, use it as firewood.
Great word, Dean. At Run for God, we care about more than just your exercise. We care about your relationship with God, and we believe that the music you listen to while you run can help build your relationship with God. That's why we partnered with J Radio. J Radio offers a variety of positive and Christian playlists that you can listen to while you run. You can find a playlist that is put together by Run Club members just like you and the Run for God station at J Radio.
Well, I got to mention on the USATF website, I thought, I don't know that my name's been on, they wrote up an article and they only picked out one person to talk about as from the steeplechase event and all the age groups. And they talked about me.
That was pretty cool. I saw that.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. So, and they mentioned that it was an impressive time. I like that. The only thing they didn't mention was they didn't mention Run for God at all. So,
did they put a picture?
No, there was no picture. But they had, when we do the National Club Cross Country Championships, I'm part of the Chattanooga Track Club, so I'm running for the Chattanooga Track Club. So anytime I register for anything that's USATF affiliated, they have me as Chattanooga Track Club. So they mentioned me as part of Chattanooga Track Club, which is fine. Yeah. I don't mind representing Chattanooga for sure. But next year, my goal is to go back, break that American record, and make them put a picture of the Run for God jersey on that website.
Because those jerseys, you can't miss them.
That's right.
It stands out.
That is right. Yep.
Hey, before you move on below here, we skipped right over. So we are in August right now. Mm-hmm. September, October is some of the most popular times going into fall to start 5K challenge classes.
Yeah.
So if you're out there, we talked earlier about becoming a coach and all that kind of stuff. But what we said earlier is true. It will change you more than it will change the athletes that you're coaching. With the new website that's releasing here in a couple weeks, it's going to be easy to do. We're bringing back the coaching portal. It won't release exactly when the website releases, but within a couple weeks it will be out. But we've had some conversations that coaching classes in churches was what got Run for God started. And then COVID happened, and we kind of softly went away from that when we introduced Run Club, and it's been really cool to see how Run Club has brought people from all across the country together. But now we're excited to really be putting a focus back on the coaching and the classes in the churches, and to marry that together with what we've done with Run Club.
Yeah.
Think about that. You have not only people knowing each other from across the country, but entire groups that get to know each other from across the country. So it's going to be a really neat dynamic, and we will have that up. Keep a lookout for your email. But go ahead and start today. Start praying about it, thinking about it. Do you want to coach a session this fall? We'll probably have a session that will start mid-late September as a national thing that you could be part of with your local church. But be thinking about it. It's important. It will do more for you than it will ever do for your students, and it will change your students' lives. So be thinking about it and praying about it.
For sure. Yeah. Well, there were some big coaching announcements. I don't know if you saw this, but Sean Brosnan, the guy who has coached Newberry Park, this greatest high school cross country team ever, is now going to coach at UCLA.
Really?
Yeah. So that's a big promotion. And then Shalane Flanagan, who a lot of folks know, is going to be the assistant coach at the University of Oregon. So that's going to be a big deal. So two big coaching changes there, big announcements. So it's going to be interesting to see how those shake out. With Brosnan, I still feel like, it'd be interesting to see how he does at UCLA.
Yeah.
And then I saw some more talk about Devin Allen. We talked about his disqualification from World Championships because he started 1/100th of a second before a 10th of a second. It's
crazy when you say it out loud.
Yeah, it is. And I hope they do something about this thing, but it's really convincing that the timing was different at this World Championship. So it was a double whammy for him. And the bad part was Devin Allen went to the University of Oregon. It was in their stadium. He had run the fastest time in the world so far that year, and then gets DQ'd, and just sad. Now he's with the Philadelphia Eagles, though. So if you're a football fan, check out Devin Allen with the Philadelphia Eagles. He's going to be a wide receiver. I hope to see him make the squad. I don't think they're sure yet. And I saw this post on Let's Run. You're going to love this one. So Alex Yee and Hayden Wild, they're triathletes who have both run under 13:30 for 5K. And the message boards were full of people saying, I wonder how fast they could be if they focused on running.
Oh, come on.
Well, I'm not sure they'd be any faster, and you and I have seen it, right?
Yeah.
But this is something that's kind of evolved in my thoughts over the years, because I used to say the same thing when I saw that. I thought, man, gosh, I wish I could get them to focus on just running. The truth is that if they were just runners, they could probably be just as fast, but I don't know that they would be any faster.
Dean, I'm convinced, well, maybe not them, but I'm convinced there's some runners that are faster only because they're triathletes.
Yeah.
And I use Lane as an example. We have proven it now a couple different times that when all Lane does is running, I think his running suffers. The most recent being we saw an injury. Now, was that because of the running? I don't know, but it's proven with him that when he has biking and swimming in the mix, it makes him a better runner. So I think it's, you can't make those kind of statements about people like triathletes, because it's their body is adapted. Everybody's bodies are different, and their bodies are adapted, and they thrive with the cross training.
Yeah. Well, and we've seen people who do really well with high mileage and people who do with low mileage, and these folks just happen to do well with the cross training that's set in. But I got a theory. I thought about this a lot over this past week, and here's my theory as to why triathletes do so well as runners, if that's their best part of the triathlon. And I think it's mental, and I'll tell you why I think it's mental. I think that the pain you feel when you're running is a very specific kind of pain. Now, you got pain of trying to do long races, and short races are a little bit different, but the pain of running is one type of pain. The pain that you feel on a bicycle, completely different.
Sure.
It is not the same at all. So pushing through that discomfort on a bike, way different than pushing through the discomfort on the run. Swimming, different again. And so what triathletes have, I think, that's so important is they have this. First of all, they're pushing through the pain more often because they're training at a higher level more often.
Higher intensity.
They don't have to do all the slow, easy miles that a runner has to do because they're getting that benefit on the bicycle and they're swimming. And so I think the fact that they spend more time pushing themselves harder and that they're able to push themselves in different ways makes them more versatile and makes them a better runner. What do you think?
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. A triathlete, they don't have many, how do I want to say that? Zone 2 efforts, Zone 1, Zone 2 efforts, because, it's just like swimming. Swimming, you can do workouts in swimming every day because there's no impact on the body. And usually typically the only reason you don't do workouts every day on the run is just the breakdown of the body. Running is the hardest of the three sports on your body. So if it didn't damage your body the way it does, then you could do workouts every day. Well, having the bike, which is probably half as much of the damage that running does on your body, you can do some higher intensity. And then swimming, I mean, you can go max effort every day in swimming. So it allows you to build up that that threshold. I don't want to say faster, but a good example. I asked Lane the other day, he's about to start cross country with the college, and I said, how much are your teammates running right now? Well, they're running about 90 miles a week. Lane's running about 40 miles a week. but he's doing 100 miles on the bike a week, and he's doing, I don't know, 20,000 yards, 25,000 yards in the pool right now. So, I don't know, 12 miles or so in the pool a week. So a lot of our running is keeping that aerobic capacity up. But you also run the risk of running 90 miles. You run the risk of injury. It takes longer to recover. Fatigue is more intense. But if you can take those aerobic building sessions and put them on the bike or put them in the pool, I'm just interested to see when he starts the season. I think he's going to be right there with all of his teammates running half the mileage. And we've seen it with other people. And we talked about Paige Horner before, that she was one of Lane's teammates, and she was I don't remember what state, Des Moines. She was the Des Moines State cross-country champ. Yeah. Running half the mileage but a lot of the pure runners out there kind of turn their nose up, as well as a lot of the pure running coaches out there. Mm-hmm. But a lot of them are wising up to the fact that, hey, there's something. I mean, Lane's cross-country coach at UTC, he puts his runners in the pool and on the bike. Yep. He understands it. So we've always said it, there's more than one way to become great.
That's right. That's the bottom line.
We need to have an open mind about all of them.
For sure. How about a trivia question for this week? This is the definition of a term in running. Here comes the definition. A feeling of euphoria that is experienced by some individuals engaged in strenuous running, and that is held to be associated with a release of endorphins by the brain. What is that term that definition describes?
You're putting an underhanded pitch out this week.
I am. And if you know the answer to that, you can send that to dean@runforgod.com. And if you're the first person to answer that, then you will get a Run Club tumbler. So dean@runforgod.com, be the first person to send it there, and you can get a tumbler. So that's a pretty simple one, huh?
Yeah.
You know what that one is. So what are you thinking that the fact that you know it means it's simple? Is that your criteria? Or
yeah, because I don't know a lot of your trivia questions, so it must be pretty simple if I know it.
Every week I share a reason why running is so awesome, and this week I share this. It's a low barrier to entry. Almost everybody can run. You really just need a pair of shoes. And some appropriate clothing. It doesn't have to be expensive. It's a cheap sport to get involved with.
You can make it expensive.
You can. But
you don't have to.
But you don't have to. And it's very simple. It's easy to understand. You don't have to spend hours and hours learning about it. I can't think of another sport that's more simple and that's easier for people to do than running.
I want to put a asterisk by your you don't need to spend hours learning about it. Mm-hmm. There are things you need to learn.
There are.
You don't need to go out and run 6 miles your first mile, which is basically, that's what we say in the 5K challenge. We equip people to enter the sport safely. Mm. And there are some things you need to know, but it's not a treasure trove of knowledge like some other sports. Right. Golf, for instance. There's a huge learning curve there, but running, nope, you just need to learn one or two things and you're off.
That's it. All right, our motivational thought of the week is this. I love this. I saw this on the back of a T-shirt watching American Ninja Warrior, and I liked it. It said, "Sometimes you just got to lick the stamp and send it." This comes from Daniel Ricciardo. He's an Australian race car driver. And basically what he's saying is sometimes you just got to be satisfied with what we have and do the best with what you got. Yeah. Sometimes you just got to lick the stamp and send it.
I said this to some of our team the other day talking about this new website. We can test and try to make better and test and try to make better. But sometimes you just need to get it out there.
Yep.
And that's what we're doing. We're testing to try to make it better right now. But as Dave Ramsey says sometimes, just ship it.
Just ship it.
Get it out the door, because if you try to make it perfect, once you get it perfect, it's going to be out of date. So Lick the stamp and send it.
That's right.
I like that.
Yep, that's good. All right. Until next week, may God bless every step of every run or walk. Go out there and shine your light.
Good job, Dean.
For more information about the Run for God ministry, go to runforgod.com. If you have questions about your salvation, click on the Peace with God tab. There's nothing more important. Thanks for joining us today.